Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Today we take a look at the case of a brother and sister who were part of a cocaine supply operation in Kettering and have been jailed for their part in that conspiracy. Louise Vanstone, who was 35, and her brother Dylan Vanstone, who was 27, have been jailed along with two other defendants, Stephen Waller and Gareth Conybeare. Northampton Crown Court was told that the group had been peddling cocaine from their homes in Kettering and Burton Latimer. Text shown in the court showed that Dylan Vanstone had attempted to buy a kilo of cocaine for £42,000 from Mr. Waller on the day of his arrest. When Mr. Vanstone's Mercedes was stopped in Haynes Road in Kettering in July, police found a baton, cannabis and more than £1,000 in cash. In his Wood Street home, also in Kettering, they discovered golf clubs, baseball bats and machetes. When detectives did a further analysis of his phone, they found evidence of drug dealing. HMRC investigation showed that although he'd paid less than £1,000 in tax over the recent years, he was still able to afford a lavish lifestyle. But despite being caught, Northampton Crown Court heard that he still continued to sell drugs for a further 5 months after his arrest. A further search of his home uncovered £9,990 in cash on his sofa, watches worth an excess of £75,000, designer jackets, jewellery and 2 bags containing 21.5 kilograms of cocaine and cannabis. In his sister Louise's home, which was in Orchard Crescent in Kettering, that was also searched on the same day, police found 650 grams of cocaine of 85% purity, £4,000 in cash in a safe, as well as bags which had been used for drug dealing. The court had been told how Louise had acted as her brother's administrator, dealing his drugs, transferring his cash and booking him a flight to Amsterdam. Bank transfers showed that her brother had given her £9,000 in cash, which she claimed was to help with expenses for her children. A text message between the two said, "Sis, will you drop it to me please?" Further phone evidence then led police to Sebastian Waller, who was 27. Mr. Waller had agreed to supply a kilogram of cocaine to Mr. Vanstone for £42,000. Hundreds of texts on the day of Mr. Vanstone's arrest showed Mr. Waller becoming increasingly frustrated that he could not get hold of his co-conspirator in order to complete the deal. There was also phone evidence that Mr. Waller was directly involved in buying cocaine from the importers who brought drugs into the country on the back of lorries. In Mr. Waller's home in Kingfisher Way, Burton Latimer, which was searched by police discovered 612 grams of amphetamine that someone had attempted to flush down the toilet. They also found scales, vacuum seal bags, £2,600 in cash, a machete, a gas-powered pistol, flares, incapacitating spray, and designer watches. He was given bail, and then 2 months later his address was searched again. This time the police found iPhones, numerous bank cards and a Brazilian bank statement. There were also syringes, drips and saline discovered. When Gareth Conybeare's house in Lilac Place, Kettering was searched, police found cannabis and phones. The court heard how he had been a street level dealer to whom Mr. Vanstone had sent customers. Texts were found between the pair confirming Mr. Conybeare's role at the bottom of the chain. At a hearing at Northampton Crown Court, Dylan Vanstone admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, possession of an offensive weapon, 2 counts of possession of criminal property, possession of cannabis, and driving with no insurance. Addressing Dylan Vanstone, who previously served time in 2017 for drug distribution charges, His Honour David Herbert QC said that he had played a high-level, significant role in the conspiracy, with at least 3 people working for him, adding, "You were living well in excess of your limited earnings. Phone evidence indicated that you were engaging in significant drug dealing that led police to your sister's house. You had your own successful business supplying Class A drugs, and it was a very significant business. Louise Vanstone admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and possession of criminal property. She said that she knew her brother had been storing cocaine at her house, but denied knowing the quantity. To Louise Vanstone, Judge Herbert said, "Self-dealing drug bags indicated that you were also selling cocaine as well as working on behalf of your brother. You were supplying drugs to people who were sent to you by your brother. You performed a significant role in your brother's business. You must have been aware of the general extent of his drug dealing." Mr. Waller admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, possession of criminal property, possession of a prohibited weapon, and possession of amphetamine. The court was told how he was organising and buying on a commercial scale, with substantial links to the original source. Prosecutors suggested that the text showed that he was the link between Mr. Vanstone and the importers. Addressing Mr. Waller, Judge Herbert QC said, "There were messages passing between you and Mr. Vanstone that referred to him getting one for £42,000, which, by inference, is a discussion for a kilogram of high purity cocaine, which, if not for the police, would have been delivered. Dylan had the money, and you, Mr. Waller, were very frustrated when you could not deliver. You were a man who was capable of supplying a kilo of high purity cocaine, something that you were in the final stages of processing on December the 29th when Mr. Vanstone was arrested. It is clear that you are very well connected. That kilo was not a one-off. Text messages show that you'd supplied a wholesale amount on previous occasions." Mr. Conybeare admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and supplying cannabis. Judge Herbert QC said, "Evidence shows that you were supplying cocaine to customers that had been referred to you by Dylan Vanstone, and this had been repeatedly done over a 6-month period." Mitigating for all four was barrister Liam Muir. He said that Sebastian Waller did not have a significant amount of cocaine when his house was searched, and said the amphetamine found was to feed his own personal addiction. He said that Mr. Waller, who was Polish and had been in the country for 15 years, and had worked for 14 of those years. For Dylan Vanstone, Mr. Muir said that conspiring with your sister was not akin to conspiring with a street-level dealer who you did not have a family relationship with. He said that Louise Vanstone had been a single mum to 3 children who had worked extremely hard in an important job in a nursing home. Mr. Muir added, Louise Vanstone had a slight addiction to cocaine, and the matter had snowballed. This had had a dramatic impact on her life. She lost her career. She's been working on the healthcare wing in prison. For someone who had sole care of her children, to only being able to see them for an hour at a time, it's had a huge impact on her life. Mr. Muir said that Mr. Conybeare had joined the prison council since being in custody, and was determined to stop offending. As they were sentenced by Mr. Herbert QC, by Judge Herbert QC, the Vanstone brother and sisters, Louise cried as she stood up to hear the length of her prison sentence, crying, "I can't," as the judge spoke. There were gasps from their extended family who were present at the court hearing. When Judge Herbert outlined the sentencing guidelines, Louise Vanstone was given 4.5 years in prison, including a 6-month concurrent sentence for possession of criminal property. The extended family cried in the dock as Louise was given her sentence, shouting, "We love you, Dill," as she was taken down to the cells. Mr. Waller and Dylan Vanstone were each sentenced to a total of 7.5 years in prison for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, with shorter sentences to run concurrently for the offensive weapon and criminal property possession offences. Mr. Conybeare was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, including a 12-month concurrent sentence for possession of cannabis. All convicted will serve half of their sentence before becoming eligible for release. All of the sentences were also reduced by a third for their early guilty pleas. A Proceeds of Crime Act proceedings that could see the defendants deprived of some of their criminal gains are due to take place later this year. Thank you for joining us today. What are your opinions on the crimes committed by Mr. Vanstone, his sister Louise Vanstone, and Mr. Waller? Do you believe the sentences were too harsh or not harsh enough? Please let us know what you think in the comments below.